The mysterious signal. The Galactic listening station floated silently in the depths of space, its sensors constantly scanning for activity. Officer Vrel, a young alien with sharp, glowing eyes, sat at his post, sipping a bitter brew to stay awake. It had been years since anything exciting had happened near this sector. Neutral zones were quiet places, mostly avoided by warring factions. But tonight, the silence broke. "Commander, there's something strange on the scanners," Vrel called out, his voice shaking slightly. Commander Torek, an older, battle-hardened alien, moved quickly to Vrel's station. The display showed a massive object entering the sector, moving steadily. Torek squinted at the readings. "What is that?" he muttered. The design was unfamiliar, almost primitive in shape, but the energy readings were off the charts. Vrel's hands trembled as he magnified the image. The object was a war vessel, larger than any known ship in the galaxy. Its surface was sleek, dark, and radiating a faint, ominous glow. The name etched on the hull made Vrel's heart stop. "Human," he whispered. The word sent a chill through the room. Every officer in the station froze, their eyes locked on the screen. Humans were a myth, a nightmare told to scare young cadets. The stories said they were brutal, unstoppable, and disappeared long ago after waging the deadliest wars the galaxy had ever seen. Commander Torek broke the silence. "Humans haven't been seen for over a century. This can't be real." "But the readings," Vrel began, but Torek raised a hand to silence him. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," Torek ordered, "and dispatch a reconnaissance probe immediately. We need to know what this thing is doing here." The station buzzed with activity as officers scrambled to follow orders. The probe was launched, its small frame darting toward the enormous ship. As it approached, the crew held their breath, watching the live feed. The ship's surface came into sharp focus. It was eerily silent, no visible lights or external activity. But the sheer size of the vessel was terrifying. The probe transmitted data back to the station. Heavy weaponry, advanced shields, and a power source unlike anything in the known galaxy. Then, without warning, the ship powered up. Energy surged across its hull, and weapon systems came online. The probe's camera captured the glow of massive cannons turning toward the station. "Shut it down! Shut it down!" Torek shouted, but it was too late. The feed cut to static. The probe was gone. The station plunged into silence once more, every officer too afraid to speak. Torek stared at the blank screen, his mind racing. Why was a human warship here? Were they here to attack? To claim territory? Or was this a warning? Suddenly, a low hum filled the room. The station's communication console lit up with an incoming transmission. The officers exchanged nervous glances. "Is it the council?" Vrel asked. Torek shook his head. "No, it's coming from the ship." The transmission was audio only. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the speakers. "This is a restricted zone. You are advised to stand down and remain silent. Any attempt to engage will be met with force." The message ended abruptly. No further instructions, no explanations, just a warning. "What do we do now?" Vrel whispered, his voice barely audible. Torek straightened, his expression grim. "We wait, and we pray they don't decide to act." As the crew sat in uneasy silence, the ship remained still, its weapons glowing faintly like a predator watching its prey. Somewhere deep in the galaxy, the council would soon be alerted, but for now, the station was alone. The legend of humanity had just become terrifyingly real, and the galaxy was not ready for their return. The council's fear. The Galactic Council chamber stood at the heart of the capital world, a grand circular hall filled with towering alien figures from every faction across the galaxy. The room buzzed with tension as news of the human war vessel spread like wildfire. Ambassador Zoril, a thin, scaled diplomat from the Varnek Empire, slammed his fist on the marble table. "I thought humans were extinct. How can this be possible? Across from him, the hulking figure of General Croath of the Drakkar Dominion leaned forward, his yellow eyes glowing under his heavy brow. It doesn't matter how it's possible. The fact is, they're here now. Murmurs of fear and disbelief rippled through the chamber. Humans were more than a distant memory. They were a warning etched into the galaxy's past, a force no one dared to provoke. Council leader Salis, an elder from the Urine Consortium, rose slowly, her silver robes shimmering in the soft chamber lights. She raised her hand to silence the room. I was there, during the last conflict with humanity, Salis began, her voice calm but carrying the weight of history. We assumed they were gone because they chose to disappear. But if a war vessel has returned, it means one thing. Humanity believes they are needed once more. Zoral's scales rattled nervously. Needed for what? Conquest. Destruction. Salis shook her head. No, for balance. The council chamber fell deathly quiet. Balance. The word felt heavier when spoken in the context of humanity. The stories told of humanity's unmatched ability to wage war, but also their restraint. They were the galaxy's storm and shield, appearing only when conflict threatened to spiral beyond control. But why now? One of the younger ambassadors asked, eyes wide with confusion. General Croath leaned back, arms crossed. Perhaps we've been too careless. Our wars grow louder. Our greed reaches further. A cold realization dawned upon the room. The factions had been at each other's throats for years, skirmishing for resources and power. Maybe, just maybe, humanity had been watching all along. Council leader Salis nodded slowly. The presence of a human warship is not an accident. It is a message. They are reminding us. They are still here. Then what do we do? Zoral's voice trembled. Salis exhaled. We send emissaries. Attempt diplomacy before war. General Croath's sharp teeth flashed in a grim smile. Diplomacy with humans is like standing before a loaded cannon. Let's hope it doesn't fire. Suddenly, alarms blared. A holographic image flickered to life in the center of the chamber. A live feed from the listening station that first detected the human ship. A pale officer appeared, his face tight with panic. Council, the human war vessel has vanished. It's no longer on our scanners. Gasps echoed across the chamber. Zoral shot to his feet. Vanished. A ship that size doesn't just disappear. It was last seen near the edge of the nebula drift, the officer continued. But now, there's nothing. No trace. General Croath narrowed his eyes. They aren't gone. They're hiding. Zoral turned to Salis. Surely this is an act of war. We must prepare fleets. Salis closed her eyes for a moment, as if weighing her words carefully. We will prepare, but we will not strike first. Zoral hissed in frustration. And if they strike us first? Salis opened her eyes, her gaze cold as ice. Then we survive. If we can. As the transmission ended, the chamber once again descended into uneasy silence. Plans were drawn, fleets were mobilized, and scouts were sent to search for the missing ship. But deep down, every faction knew one truth. Humanity was not an enemy you sought. If they were here, it was because they allowed it. And if they were gone, they were still watching. Far beyond the reach of scanners, the human warship drifted in the dark. Its crew watched the galaxy in silence, their weapons primed but cold. One of the officers on the bridge glanced toward the captain. Think they got the message. The captain's eyes glowed softly under the dim lights. Not yet, but they will. The ship vanished into the nebula once more, leaving behind only whispers and fear. Shadow in the dark. The Drakkar patrol ship drifted silently along the edge of the nebula drift, its long, spiked frame cutting through the swirling gases like a knife through mist. Lieutenant Varric adjusted his scanner, eyes narrowing as the readings danced erratically across his screen. Anything yet? Captain Wren growled from the command chair, his armored scales glinting under the pale bridge lights. Nothing. No sign of the human ship, Varric replied, though his fingers hovered nervously over the controls. He didn't like how quiet the nebula felt. Space was never truly silent. But this was something different. Keep scanning. They're out there, Wren muttered. The crew knew the stories. Human ships didn't just vanish. They lingered, unseen, unheard, until it was too late. Wren had fought in countless skirmishes, but this was the first time he felt hunted. Hours passed. Patrol routes were doubled, and sensor sweeps intensified, but there was no trace of the war vessel. The longer the search stretched, the more restless the crew became. Then it happened. A faint glimmer flickered across Varric's screen, just for a second. His heart jumped. "Captain, I caught something on long-range sensors," Varric said quickly, his claws tapping feverishly at the console. 15 degrees off our current heading." Captain Wren's gaze sharpened. "Alter course. I want full weapons primed." The ship veered toward the signal, engines humming softly in the dense nebula. The swirling clouds outside the viewport made visibility impossible, but the faint trace remained, as if something massive lurked just beyond sight. Closer. Varric felt the pulse in his throat quicken. The sensors began to distort, but not from interference. This was different, almost like the space around them was bending. "Captain, the readings are fluctuating, I think." Suddenly, the nebula parted. A dark silhouette emerged through the haze, massive and unyielding. The human war vessel loomed above them like a phantom, silent and motionless. No lights, no signals. It was as if the ship itself were part of the void. Gasps echoed across the bridge. Even Captain Wren stiffened at the sight. "It's just sitting there," Varric whispered, unable to tear his eyes from the viewport. Wren clenched his jaw. "Open communications. Hail them." Varric hesitated, then activated the comms. "This is Captain Wren of the Drakkar patrol vessel Kolvak. You are within restricted space. Identify yourselves immediately." The transmission hung in the void. No response. "They heard us," Wren growled. "Humans always hear." For a long minute, nothing happened. The human warship remained still, its enormous cannons locked in place. Then, without warning, the ship's lights flared to life. The sudden glow cast deep shadows across the nebula, illuminating the vessel's surface. Dark steel, jagged edges, and weapons that seemed far too large for any normal conflict. A message flashed across the Drakkar ship's console. "Leave." One word. Captain Wren's fists tightened around the arms of his chair. "So, they're playing games now." "Captain," Varric's voice was shaking. "Perhaps we should comply. This isn't like anything we faced." Before Wren could respond, the human ship moved. It didn't accelerate or engage thrusters. It simply drifted forward, gliding soundlessly through the nebula. The Kolvak's scanners froze, unable to keep up with its movements. "Track them. I want to know where they're going," Wren barked. I'm trying," Varric stammered. "But they're gone." The human ship faded into the nebula once more, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. Silence filled the bridge. The crew exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Captain Wren exhaled slowly. "Mark this location. I want full reports sent to the Dominion. The Council needs to know what's happening out here." Varric hesitated, his fingers still trembling over the controls. "Sir, what do we tell them?" Wren's eyes remained locked on the empty nebula. "Tell them the truth. The shadows we feared have returned, and they're watching." Far from the Drakkar patrol, deep within the nebula, the human war vessel continued its silent drift. On the bridge, the crew monitored the Drakkar ship's movements carefully. "They saw us," one officer remarked, glancing at the ship's captain. The captain smirked faintly. They were meant to. A faint hum filled the air as the warship's systems powered down once more. The galaxy was growing bold. It wouldn't be long before the humans had to step out of the shadows for good. But not yet. Not yet. The ancient pact. Beneath the towering spires of the Galactic Council Hall, hidden far below the public chambers, lay the archive of forgotten wars. It was a place few dared to visit. The air felt colder here, and the walls were lined with ancient records sealed away for generations. Ambassador Zoral's footsteps echoed through the long corridor as he followed Council Leader Salus. The glow of the archive lights cast long shadows behind them. "You believe there's something down here that explains the return of the humans?" Zoral asked, his voice uncertain. Salus didn't slow her pace. "There is more to their disappearance than the stories we were told." Zoral's scales tightened nervously. Every child of the Varnak Empire grew up hearing tales of humanity's rise and fall, tales of their brutal efficiency in war, their unmatched ability to destroy, and the mysterious day they simply vanished. But no one ever asked why. At the end of the corridor, Salus stopped before a large, circular vault door. With a slow wave of her hand, the seals unlocked with a deep hiss. As the door slid open, the glow of golden data tablets shimmered from within. Zoral stepped inside cautiously. The room was vast, lined with shelves filled with ancient records. The scent of old metal and forgotten history hung in the air. After the War of the Shattered Stars, Salus began, running her fingers over the spines of the tablets. There was an agreement, not one known to the galaxy at large, but a pact made in secret. Zoral frowned. "A pact? Between us and the humans?" Salus nodded. She pulled an old tablet from the shelf, its surface worn from age. As she placed it on the center console, the room dimmed, and a hologram flared to life. The image displayed a human figure, tall and clad in dark military attire. His face was unreadable, eyes shadowed beneath his hood. The insignia of Earth's military forces glimmered faintly on his chest. Zoral leaned closer, fascinated by the sight. "Who is this?" Salus's gaze darkened. "Admiral Lucian Grant, the last human commander the Council ever dealt with directly." The hologram flickered to life, and the Admiral's voice echoed through the chamber. "The galaxy teeters on the edge of collapse. You fight over borders and resources as if they are infinite. But we have seen the pattern before. We know how this ends. It is not humanity you should fear. It is yourselves." Zoral's eyes widened as he listened. The voice carried a strange weight, not of arrogance, but certainty. "We will not impose order, but when the day comes that your conflicts threaten to consume everything, we will return. Not as conquerors, but as judges." The hologram ended abruptly, plunging the room into silence. Zoral's throat tightened. "Judges." Salus placed the tablet back on the shelf. The pact was simple. Humanity would retreat from galactic affairs, but only for as long as peace was maintained. The moment our wars escalated, they would return. Zoral took a step back, his heart pounding. "So, we broke the pact." Salus nodded grimly. The skirmishes between the factions, the endless disputes over territory and power. We thought humanity was gone, but they were only waiting. Zoral's hands trembled slightly as he tried to process the revelation. "And now that they're back." "They aren't here for war," Salus said softly. "They are here to see if we are still worthy of peace." The weight of the words hung heavily between them. Zoral frowned as another thought crossed his mind. If this pact existed, why was it hidden from the rest of the council? Salus met his gaze with a cold, unreadable expression. "Because we thought we could avoid their return. That by keeping the pact secret, the galaxy would never provoke humanity again." A faint hum echoed from the vault entrance, drawing their attention. An emergency alert flashed across Zoral's communicator. "What is it?" Salus asked, sensing the tension in Zoral's face. Zoral's eyes flicked over the message, his scales paling. "A new transmission. From the humans." Salus's expression hardened. "Play it." Zoral activated the console, and a deep, calm voice filled the archive. "This is Admiral Lucian Grant, commanding the war vessel Ironfall. The galaxy stands at a crossroads. Choose your path carefully. This is your only warning." The transmission ended, leaving the archive in silence once more. Zor-El exhaled slowly, his eyes drifting back to the hologram of the Admiral. "What now?" Salas turned, stepping out of the vault. "Now, we prepare for their judgment. Desperate measures." The council chamber was shrouded in silence. Every faction leader stood in tense formation around the holographic display that flickered with the image of the human war vessel Ironfall, a ghostly shadow that loomed over the galactic map like a specter of war. Ambassador Zor-El could still hear Admiral Grant's final words ringing in his ears. "This is your only warning." The chamber's air felt heavy, as if the weight of the entire galaxy rested on their shoulders. Zor-El's claws tapped nervously against the table, breaking the silence. "We cannot afford to wait," he said, glancing at the assembled leaders. The humans made their position clear. If we fail to act, they will make the decision for us. General Croath leaned forward, his armored form casting a shadow over the table. "You propose we negotiate with ghosts, Ambassador." His deep voice rumbled like distant thunder. "They'd vanished for over a century. Why speak now? Why not strike them first?" Zor-El's scales bristled. "Strike them? You saw what one warship did to our patrol fleets. We lost 3 vessels in the nebula drift without a single human casualty. Attacking them would be suicide." Salas, silent until now, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but sharp. The Admiral's words were clear. "They seek peace, but only if we are wise enough to take it. If we provoke them, they will not hesitate to finish what they started long ago." The room fell quiet again, as if no one wanted to be the first to admit what they all feared. Humanity's return was not a threat. It was a verdict. Zor-El's gaze flickered to Salas. "You mentioned a hidden colony before, a human settlement beyond the fringes of known space. Is it real?" Salas nodded. "I believe so. But reaching it is no simple task. It lies beyond the Veil sector, in a system cloaked from our long-range sensors. The path is dangerous, and even if we find them, there's no guarantee they will listen." General Croath snorted. "Humans don't listen. They dictate terms." Zor-El straightened. "Then we send an emissary. I volunteer." The chamber stirred. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the assembly. "You're a fool," Croath growled. "That vessel will tear you apart before you even reach their borders." Zor-El met his gaze with quiet determination. "Perhaps, but if one life can prevent a war that will claim billions, I'm willing to take the risk." Salas's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. He may have a point. Humans respect courage. They do not tolerate weakness, but they have always honored those who stand unshaken. The council deliberated for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, Salas raised her hand. "It is decided. Ambassador Zor-El will make the journey." Days later, outer fringe of the Veil sector. The diplomatic vessel Ellerin glided through the dark expanse beyond the edges of charted space. The stars seemed dimmer here, as if the universe itself feared the presence that lurked just beyond sight. Zor-El stood at the helm, watching as the swirling gases of the Veil Nebula slowly parted ahead. His crew whispered nervously behind him. "Sir, the sensors are failing again," one officer reported. "There's interference, but no source." Zor-El didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the distant shape emerging from the nebula. The Ironfall. It drifted in silence, far larger than he remembered. Like a sleeping giant, its cannon sat idle, but the faint hum of power radiated through the void. Zor-El swallowed hard and activated the comms. "This is Ambassador Zor-El of the Varnek Empire," he announced, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "I request an audience with Admiral Lucian Grant." The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Then the ship answered. A soft pulse of light rippled across the Ironfall's hull. The vessel began to shift, gliding toward the Ellerin with eerie precision. "Brace for docking," Zoril commanded. As the Iron Falls hangar doors opened, the true scale of humanity's technology became clear. Inside, rows of sleek, angular fighters lined the walls, each one a machine of war unlike anything Zoril had seen. Human soldiers stood at attention as the diplomatic vessel settled into the hangar bay. Zoril stepped out, his heart pounding. At the far end of the hangar, Admiral Lucian Grant waited. He was older than the hologram, his hair streaked with silver, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "Ambassador Zoril." Grant greeted him, his voice smooth but firm. "I wondered when someone would come." Zoril bowed his head respectfully. "Admiral Grant, the Council wishes to understand your return." "We." Grant raised a hand, silencing him. "The Council wishes to survive." Zoril hesitated. "Yes, we do." Grant stepped forward, his gaze piercing. "The galaxy's fragile peace has already begun to crack. You know this. The factions squabble like children, and war is inevitable. We are not here to destroy, but to prevent what is coming." Zoril frowned. "You believe war cannot be stopped?" Grant's expression hardened. "It can, but only if the Council learns to stand united. We will not intervene directly. However," he gestured toward the endless rows of warships behind him, "should the factions tip the balance, we will remind them why humanity was feared." Zoril nodded slowly. He understood. The humans had returned not as conquerors, but as guardians standing at the edge of the abyss. And their watch had just begun. The final stand. The Galactic Council's fleets gathered at the edge of the Veil sector, their ships forming a vast ring around the disputed neutral zone. Dreadnoughts, cruisers, and carriers from every major faction floated in uneasy silence, their weapons primed but cold. Ambassador Zoril stood aboard the command deck of the Ellerin, his eyes fixed on the swirling mists of the nebula ahead. Somewhere beyond the Veil, the human fleet watched, unseen but ever-present. The Council had deliberated for days, and the decision had finally been made. A delegation would be sent to formally propose an alliance with humanity, but not all factions were in agreement. "This feels wrong," General Croath growled through the comms. His battle-scarred face filled the holo display. "We've gathered our might, and now we beg for peace from ghosts." Celis's calm voice cut through the tension. "We do not beg, General. We recognize the balance of power. Humanity's return shifts that balance, and it is better to stand with them than against them." Croath's yellow eyes narrowed. "You assume they want peace. I assume they want submission." Before Zoril could respond, a sharp alarm blared across the deck. A transmission flickered to life, interrupting their discussion. "Incoming vessels, unidentified." The room fell silent. Zoril's heart raced as the scanners flared, detecting massive energy signatures on the outer perimeter. His mind jumped to the worst-case scenario. Had the humans grown impatient? "Bring it up," he ordered. The display shifted, revealing not the angular, dark warships of humanity, but sleek, crimson vessels bearing the insignia of the Drekar Dominion. Croath's fleet. "They broke formation," Celis said coldly. Zoril's claws tightened around the edge of the console. "Croath, what is the meaning of this?" The general's face returned to the screen, calm but firm. "I will not sit idle while the rest of you hand over the galaxy to those relics. If the humans want to return, let them prove their strength." Zoril's eyes widened. "You're provoking them. This isn't the way." "Stay out of my way, Ambassador," Croath interrupted. His fleet surged forward, slipping past the Council blockade and plunging into the nebula. Zoril turned to Celis, panic rising in his voice. "We have to stop him." Celis's expression darkened. "It's too late." Inside the nebula, the Drekar vanguard. Croath's fleet pushed deeper into the dense clouds, their sensor arrays flickering from the interference. The nebula seemed to swallow the ships whole, cutting off communication with the outer perimeter. On the bridge of the Vornak, Croath stood tall, his hands clasped behind his back. He stared into the swirling void, waiting. "Humans are predators," he muttered to his officers. "But even predators bleed." Moments later, the void answered. A single ship emerged from the mist, the Ironfall. Its cannons remained cold, but the faint blue glow of its engines lit the darkness like the eye of a sleeping giant. "Sir, it's just one ship," one of Croat's officers said, confused. Croat sneered. "They think intimidation will save them. Target their engines." The crew hesitated, but the orders were clear. The Vornek's cannons hummed to life, locking onto the human vessel. Before they could fire, the Ironfall vanished. "No, it's still there," Croat muttered. His eyes darted to the flickering sensors. "It's using the nebula tow." "Sir." The nebula erupted. Hundreds of smaller vessels descended from the mist. Human fighters, sleek and fast. They weaved through the Drakkar ships with terrifying precision, slicing through their shields with pinpoint strikes. Explosions bloomed in the distance as two cruisers detonated, their hulls breached by weapons far more advanced than anyone anticipated. "They were waiting," Croat whispered. The Ironfall reappeared directly above the Vornek, its cannons still silent. A single message flashed across Croat's console. "This is your final warning." Croat's chest tightened. The humans could destroy his entire fleet, but they hadn't. This was a show of restraint. "Stand down," he ordered quietly. His officers hesitated, but one glance at the carnage outside told them everything they needed to know. The remaining Drakkar ships powered down their weapons and retreated, their engines burning bright as they fled the nebula. Back at the council perimeter, Zoril watched the battered Drakkar fleet limp back through the swirling clouds. His communicator flickered to life. Croat's voice was quiet but unmistakable. "They could have killed us all," the general admitted. "I won't challenge them again." Zoril exchanged a glance with Salis, who nodded solemnly. "The pact holds," she said. "For now." In the distance, the Ironfall drifted beyond the edge of the nebula, slowly turning away from the council fleets. Zoril felt a strange sense of relief, but also an unsettling realization. The humans had proven their point without firing a single shot, and somewhere, beyond the veil, their full strength remained hidden. "Let's hope we never see what happens when they stop holding back," Zoril whispered. The last warning. The council chamber was filled with an eerie quiet. The battered Drakkar fleet had returned, bruised but alive. Across the galaxy, the message was clear. Humanity had returned, but they had chosen patience over annihilation. For now. Ambassador Zoril stood at the observation deck overlooking the sprawling capital city below. Thousands of ships zipped across the skies, but his eyes were distant, locked on the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the human warship Ironfall drifted in silence, watching. Salis approached, her long robes trailing softly behind her. She paused at his side, gazing out at the same stars. "They let Croat live," Zoril said quietly, as if still trying to believe it. Salis nodded. "Yes, a calculated choice." Zoril's claws tapped against the railing. Why not destroy his fleet? It would have sent a stronger message. Salis's gaze didn't waver. Because fear breeds chaos. Humanity has no need to conquer, only to remind us of the balance. If they had destroyed the Drakkar, the galaxy would have plunged into war overnight. "They're shepherds," Zoril muttered, watching their flock from the shadows. Salis smiled faintly. "Shepherds, yes, but make no mistake. If the flock grows too wild, they will cull." The thought unsettled Zoril. He had stared into the void and seen humanity's power firsthand. It wasn't just their weapons. It was the sheer confidence, the calm precision with which they held the galaxy's fate in their hands. "Have we heard from Admiral Grant since?" Zoril asked. Salis shook her head. "No transmissions. No sightings. It's as if the Ironfall disappeared back into legend." Zoril sighed. folding his arms. Perhaps that's for the best. Far beyond Council space, aboard the Ironfall, the bridge of the human warship hummed with the quiet pulse of advanced technology. Admiral Lucian Grant stood at the observation window, hands clasped behind his back, watching the distant glow of the galactic core. His second-in-command, Commander Elias Rourke, approached with a quiet nod. Drakkar forces have retreated from the nebula drift. Council fleets are reorganizing, but tensions are stable. Grant's gaze didn't shift from the stars. Stable isn't the same as secure. Rourke hesitated. They're afraid, Admiral. That alone will keep them from reckless action. Grant's expression darkened. Fear is a temporary leash, Commander. It holds until desperation snaps it. Rourke shifted uncomfortably. If that happens, we'll intervene. Grant finally turned, his eyes cold but calm. Intervene? No. If the galaxy cannot manage its own survival, we will let it collapse. That was the agreement. Rourke straightened. And if they ask for our help? A small, knowing smile tugged at Grant's lips. Then we will give it, but not without cost. He stepped forward, the stars reflecting in his eyes. They must learn, Grant said softly. We are not their guardians. We are their consequence. Galactic Capital. 2 weeks later, the Council convened an emergency session. The chamber was packed, tension rippling through the gathered factions like a storm waiting to break. General Croath stood at the center, his voice echoing with uncharacteristic humility. I stand before you not to ask for war, but to warn against it, Croath began, his yellow eyes sweeping across the delegates. I made a mistake, one that could have ended not just my fleet, but every one of your empires. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I thought humanity could be provoked, measured by the same arrogance that drives us all. I was wrong. They have no interest in conquest, but they will not tolerate chaos. Zorl leaned forward, listening intently. Croath's voice grew quieter, as if the words weighed heavily on him. They are not our enemies, but they are not our allies. They are a force we cannot control. Salis rose, her presence commanding the room. The Drakkar general speaks the truth. Humanity's return is not an invasion. It is a mirror held up to the galaxy. What we do next will define our future. Zorl stood beside her. The Council must act as one. No faction stands alone now, because if we fail to unite, the next time humanity returns, they won't just be watching. The chamber fell into silence as the weight of his words settled over them. Final transmission. Unmarked sector. A single beacon flared to life on the edges of the known galaxy. A simple message transmitted across encrypted frequencies, reaching every major faction. Peace is fragile, but it endures. For now, if you wish to speak, the path remains open. No signature, no location, but every leader knew the source. And far beyond the stars, in the cold expanse of the veil, humanity's warships drifted unseen, their cannons silent, waiting for the day the galaxy called upon them again.